Hey everyone, my name is Cameron Sperling.
I'm Ian Perry, and our presentation is on how serious games can teach us. So, a serious game is a game that exists not just for entertainment, but to teach you something that's applicable in the real world. So, not just gameplay mechanics, but actually teaching you something you can use. Um, this is usually done through storytelling and gameplay mechanics. The gameplay mechanics aspect is usually pretty important in the teaching of what you want to really get the message across. And this can tackle fairly serious subjects, but it doesn't necessarily have to use serious imagery to do this. A good example would be Animal Crossing, and how it teaches you about mortgages and stuff. As Tom Nook makes you pay for your house, and you have to pay it off over time, balancing the amount of money you have available and putting it towards the house. Which for little kids, I mean, that's a really great way to get them thinking about that stuff. And this can be seen, a great presentation for this is off of Ian Bogost, Persuasive Games, The Expressive Power of Video Games.
So, why would games be a better medium than, say, a book or a movie? And the problem with books and movies is that they're more of a one-way street. There's no interaction between the audience and the desired medium. You can't yell out at a movie and say, hey, go do that, and they'll actually do it. Games are actually interactive. You can influence your character, you influence their actions, and what you do can affect what happens in the story. And games can make you feel more responsible for the actions that you take in your world. So if your character has a certain dialogue, maybe that the other character you say it to will get mad at you, and you can't do a quest line for that specific character, or something of that particular nature.
It's really the difference between reading a textbook, which would be the equivalent of like movies or something, or going out into the field and studying biology, out in the field, hands on.
Exactly.
So James Paul Gee has a great set of principles that talk about good game learning, and it basically goes over the way that games teach players through gameplay. That's the teaching through mechanics as well as storytelling. That's the teaching about mechanics. And this is the teaching about knowledge, and it kind of applies to a way that games could teach you about knowledge to use in real life, not just gameplay mechanics. And this kind of goes for fostering the application of knowledge through gameplay, as opposed to just reading or learning through lecture like in a common classroom.
So the game that we chose that would best summarize these qualities is Undertale, which is maybe less of a traditional pick, because when someone thinks of Undertale, they think maybe of the goofy jokes that are in it, or the very loud and funny characters that are in it, or interesting interactions that are in it. But its underlying messages are definitely more of a serious topic. So in this game, the player takes the role of a human who is trapped in a world of monsters. They fall down and are transported into a world where monsters live in the underground. And the choices that the player makes vastly changes the outcome of the story. And your main underlying motive is to kill or spare monsters. If you kill them, certain characters interact with you differently. Maybe they're more angry at you, or maybe they avoid you, or maybe you clear out whole towns because everyone's so terrified of you. Or if you spare them, perhaps everyone wants to be your friend, everyone wants to talk to you, or you can convince people who have maybe bad motives into a more friendly nature. It teaches the player about really interesting topics that can be applied to real life, like empathy. Whether you want to spare these monsters that are potentially even trying to kill you, or would you rather act in self-defense and attack them? Or not judging based on initial appearance, like the game's main antagonist, Flowey, first appears to you as a very nice, calm, and helpful flower, and it would appear as though this person wants to help you out. They look very friendly, they look very nice. But then, as the flower is teaching you the mechanics, it's revealed very quickly this flower has no other desire other than to kill you, and it's a very evil character that actually turns out to be the game's antagonist. And this game also teaches you that problems can be resolved without the use of violence. You don't have to be violent to solve a problem. Any character in this game can be simply talked to discourage them from fighting, and maybe even have a pleasant outcome where you and the other character can potentially even become friends.
So the first aspect of good game learning is identity. So learning requires commitment in any instance, not just video games. And in order to foster that commitment, a great way to do it is to make you interested in the character. And the way they do that is through choosing different types of character types. So one example would be the faceless character that you can kind of self impose on. So it kind of feels like it's you that's going through the story. Another one would be the fully developed character, such as like The Witcher from Witcher 3. So you can kind of see his own character and you're interested in his story and what they do. And either way, it depends on the person how it works effectively, but it kind of still does the same thing of making you want to keep learning.
Yeah, there's a difference between carving your own story and maybe looking out for someone else's story and seeing how they play out.
So yeah, in Undertale, one example of this is Undertale uses the blank slate character I mentioned. They specifically went out of their way to make it so it's a very androgynous character. No gender, skin colors, bright yellow, so it doesn't really apply to any race again. So either way you can self-impose yourself onto it, which is for some people is great, including myself. And yeah, it helps you identify with that character. And also, as previously stated, fostering a sense of empathy, because in a way you are this character. As you go through the story, you're interacting with these monsters. So the actions feel personal because of that. So think about it. What type of character do you like more? Do you want the fully developed one, such as The Witcher? Or do you want to do more something like Undertale, or even something like, say, Fallout, for example, where you have to develop your own character? Do you like learning about the characters? Would you rather create them yourself? Which works better? Personally, I am of the mindset that I would much rather create my own character. D&D is huge in this, and I absolutely love D&D because it's all about creating your own character, and you can really build it from the ground up and make it anything you want, and it's a great time to further develop that character, especially when you combine other people in with it to do that with you.
And for me, I would honestly prefer more learning characters. Like, for example, in The Last of Us, you learn the character Joel, and you learn that he's more of a hard head, he likes to do things his way, and after he loses his daughter, he becomes more distraught, more disconnected. And you want, at least for me personally, I like following his story. How does he cope with that? How does he maybe replace his daughter Sarah with the new character Ellie? How does their relationship work? And for me, it's okay to not necessarily be influencing that character and maybe what decisions they make, but to simply go along with it and interact with them along the way. So the second principle of James Paul Guy's good game learning is interaction. Games by nature are inherently interactive in the fact that you control a character, you control what they do. They talk back to you, unlike a book or movie. Like in dialogue options, like in the Telltale's The Walking Dead, you get to choose what your character says, and then the characters respond to you in a certain way. Or in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, there are multiple times where you can choose to maybe let an assailant go, choose to attack them, continue talking to them, press them for information. There's a lot of different things you can do with these dialogue options that are more interactive with the game, obviously something that you couldn't do with a book or a movie. And it gives context to what the player is learning when you talk to other characters and get to choose what you're saying.
Yeah, that same sort of feeling of, like earlier, going out to the field versus watching or reading a textbook.
Yeah, it allows for better use of what's been learned. It's more interesting to learn about it when you're involved in it. And how it applies to Undertale is you engage with conversations with the monsters that are attacking your character, and you dodge their attacks, and then when it's your turn, you choose to act. And by acting, you can do different things like you can talk to them, you can flirt with them, even you can insult them, you can do a list of things that might potentially get you out of that fight. it encourages peace and discourages violence because you're not literally harming them. You're just trying to get them to maybe be a friend, back away from you, or anything that would discourage violence. And I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
But different actions result in different attacks and responses from the enemies. So there's one enemy called Vegetoid, and he's essentially a large carrot. And if you choose the interaction to make dinner, Vegetoid will then say, "Eat your greens," and his white attacks will harm you, but certain green attacks will come down and it'll actually heal you if you collect them.
Mm-hmm.
Same with a character called Washua. If you select the clean action, then the character will shoot water at you, and the green droplets of water are able to heal you. And and it comes down to the fact of it's your choice of sparing or killing monsters, and these cause different ramifications, different reactions of characters. Like there's one point in the game where if you're doing a genocide run where you're killing everything, and you run into a character called Papyrus, you can either kill them outright or spare them. And this has a huge impact on the story because if you spare Papyrus, his brother Sans, who is the main antagonist of this particular run, won't fight you.
Mm-hmm.
He'll respect you for sparing his brother, and you'll be able to bypass his boss fight. And these cause, very difficulties of boss fights potentially. The more you kill, the more characters will be motivated to attack you or to, be more evil towards you or be more negative.
So, another one is production. This is basically the idea that players kind of help write the game. And this, again, is pretty much strictly a video game thing. There's a few examples of other examples of things like this in literature, but it's mostly just a thing you can do in video games. And it really makes it so that players can be vastly different based on each player's experience. And this can kind of be related to the curriculum in school. About how students can kind of it'd be the equivalent of a system where students would be able to kind of make their own curriculum to suit their best needs, and then that's kind of exactly what you do and players would be able to do what's most interesting to them in the games. So this doesn't really occur in Undertale too much. There's not really an example of you writing the game. I think there's a few mods out there for it, but that's about it. A great example for it, though, is Fallout 4, where you get to build your own houses. But the game doesn't have an inherent... there's a few places where some things are built for you, but really the developers didn't go in and make a house for you and say, live in this house. It's your house. You get to build it. You get to write the location data. You get to make the house to live in. And it really reinforces that this is your game, not somebody else's. And again, it kind of does the farthers the interaction to it, which again makes you more committed to playing the game. It gets you more interested. It makes you want to play more and therefore learn more.
And perhaps you can even share with others because no one's game or no one's story will look exactly like yours.
Mm-hmm.
Because you go to someone else's world, maybe look at it and be like, oh, that's interesting how you do that with your house. Show me how to do that, or maybe I can add this on because I saw what you have. You can definitely write your own story even based on other people because they'll be unique too. So the next principle of James Paul Guy's principles of good game learning would be risk-taking. Good games should have a low consequence for failure. You shouldn't be punished for trying new strategies or maybe exploiting new ideas or anything like that. Games should certainly be encouraging risk-taking. They don't want to have you just sit there and think, oh, this is the only way I can beat this boss, or this is the only way this level is supposed to be played. You want to go and try to do whatever you possibly can to make the game more unique to you. And through risk-taking, new strategies are learned. For example, speedrunning maybe. How would speedrunning be a thing if they didn't take risks, try new strategies, try new angles on bosses? Maybe they even, use new items before, or, things like that, which is unfortunately basically the opposite of most school systems, which very heavily are against risk taking. School environments are definitely something that it's very regimented in the fact that you do what you're told, you don't stray far from the path, because if you do, you'll get a bad grade. So, And how this applies to Undertale is the existence of a save function as a literal game mechanic. And characters will often reference your human character's unique ability to save. They'll even say that if you die, you can go back to your save file. And save points are often always close to the hardest fights, so you can return to the bosses that you're having trouble with, and you'll continue to learn and progress because those save points are so close. It encourages you to take risks and say, well, maybe that didn't work. I'll try this one, because even if I lose, I'm right there. I don't have to work too hard to get exactly back where I was. There's not particular consequences for losing. And this game, actually, there might even be benefits to risk-taking and losing, because one of the game's bosses actually refuses to kill you because he thinks you're too nice. He'll continue to lock you in a jail, but he won't actually kill you, and eventually you can even bypass his boss fight. And, it encourages learning from your mistakes. Like, maybe that boss in particular, oh, this one attack really gets me. Here's how I can prepare for it.
Customization. This is kind of going back onto the idea of the production. This is more in-game. It's a customization of gameplay. You can really choose your desired style, and from that choose your own difficulty. Which means that any game that has a difficulty function has some degree of customization. It works really well with the risk-taking principle. So players can kind of discover what they want to play as and what works best. So you might go in one time with one piece of armor, find out, okay, I'm really slow now, I can't move, and say this isn't fun, and then go in again with a much lighter piece of armor. You might get hit more, or you might take more damage, but you're going to get hit less, and maybe you find that more enjoyable. And that's where the customization comes in. It's making it so it's farther your game.
Yeah, developing your own unique play style to certain examples.
Definitely. So in Undertale, this is applied through using different items. So there's one item, the frying pan, that gives you more defense, but maybe not as much attack as some of the other items. There's the notebook, which gives you longer invincibility after you get hit. Again, same, maybe not more attack. Then there's items that are much more attack. So if you're confident in not getting hit, but you want to just do more damage to get it over with, that's your item. But if you're taking a lot of damage and you maybe want to, outlast, use some healing items in between rounds, sort of thing, you might take the notebook. It's and farther that, there's some that improve your speed, which again would be avoiding damage in that case. Furthermore, sparing enemies. As far as a difficulty system, Undertale does this by sparing enemies, which would give you which is a pacifist run, which gives you an easier timing gameplay, versus killing enemies, which would be the genocide run, which is the hardest type of gameplay, and that has some really, really difficult bosses, most notably the end boss in that game. It is by far the hardest, but it's a great time if you enjoy the difficulty. And this sort of situation is to a limited degree in schools. You have your honor programs and stuff if you can do that versus just normal classes. But if it was incorporated much more into like a school system, it might promote learning better and kind of same that tailoring the experience for students.
So the sixth of James Paul Guy's principles of good game learning is agency. And agency is basically a culmination of all of the principles that came before it. Players have a sense of ownership to their actions. It's specifically inherent to games. Like, you can't get this anywhere else besides games. Though some games can do it better than others, and things like that.
Yeah, the main thing is it's all kind of focused around that same whole immersion, going out into the field doing stuff. That's kind of the whole point of all this, is, at least up to this point, is giving that feeling.
And how it applies, it just gives like a general sense of ownership to your actions and decisions. Everything within the game, it feels more personal to you. And the blank character helps insertion of yourself as the character. Just like the previous principles, just kind of summarizes everything up. How variable difficulty and style of play is based on your choices. Different decisions you make can influence the game for better or worse, and for higher difficulty or lower. And that your impact as a player has an impact on the game. And again, you can't get this anywhere else, because your impact can only really, really matter in a game.
Yeah, it's an interactive form of medium. That's kind of inherent.
So think about it. How do games with different amounts of player agency affect your ability to learn? Like a visual novel compared to a role-playing game. You can't change a visual novel, but you can very much change a role-playing game. Do you like being able to influence your world? Or do you like having a set order of things?
Yeah.
So, for example, a game that, you don't really influence at all is Mario. You play Mario, you go through his story, you do the levels, you can't really decide what goes on. Like, you just do your levels, you beat the enemies, you beat Bowser, you send him in lava, or whatever that game has you do, and you rescue Peach. It's a pretty linear story. You do your thing, and your particular personality or choices don't necessarily influence the world in a different way.
And Fallout New Vegas is the exact opposite of that, where as a player, you have tons and tons and tons of agency over what you and your character do in the game. Whether it's character creation, role playing as a different character each time, which you get involved in a character, you want to see where that goes. Or the fact that the game world itself is hugely dependent on the actions that you take. It's very customizable. It's very tailored to the player, which is very important in making the player feel or want to learn, want to keep playing, in my opinion.
Yeah, it makes them feel engaged.
So another way that another aspect of good game learning is well-ordered problems. And this is that basically, as you play the game, problems are going to become harder and harder. You're not going to start off the game with, ridiculously hard problems that you've never been given the answers to. You're going to start off with something easy. You're going to start off with, maybe like in Mario, for example, the first Goomba you see, it's easy. It's not a hard thing. It's designed to get you into the game, and then farther along, you start encountering more difficult enemies. And it's basically made so that the game is created so that knowledge you gain from earlier challenges build into the later challenges, and they build up on top of each other.
Yeah, like going back to that Mario example, for example, to jump on a Goomba's head, and as the game goes on, you see maybe a Koopa, and you're like, oh, probably should jump on his head too. So you learn from what you did before and apply it to things later.
A great example of this in Undertale is how gameplay builds off itself in the fight with Undyne. So basically, this boss introduces a new gameplay mechanic in its fight. And it's kind of how your little heart that you control normally, it gets a shield, and depending on the directional input you give it, it will kind of change the direction the shield's facing. And the idea is that you have to block these little arrows that are coming at you, okay? It starts off with like 1 or 2 arrows at the beginning of the fight. As the fight moves on, you get arrows that come from all different directions, and up and down, left and right. And there's certain arrows that actually flip around to the other side. And the point is, but you don't start off with that. It's a building up procedure. So it teaches you what you need to know, and then it gives you get better at it. You get better at it, and you get better at it, and by the end, you're doing this crazy stuff that you would have in no way been possible just being thrown into the deep end.
Especially at the beginning of a boss fight, when you see these attacks, you're thinking, what am I supposed to do? But, as the fight goes on, you get more used to it, you you tailor your reactions and thoughts more to the way this boss is fighting you.
Exactly.
So the next principle of good game learning would be challenge and consolidation. It shows that a problem within a game, has been mastered, and following this, the game throws a new, harder problem with new mechanics. Again, adding on to your previous knowledge in a way to, think a new strategy. So it forces players to rethink their strategy, and it adds to what they learned in a previous experience. So, like what he was saying with the Undyne example, that arrows that are pointing towards you, you have to put your shield towards those arrows. But arrows that are facing backwards are going to flip around and hit you from the other direction. So you have to learn. So you have to kind of, summarize what you learned before and apply it to this new sort of attack. And so it's important for learning new things and pushing boundaries and just random new attacks.
And this challenging consolidation thing, in a lot of games, it kind of comes down to it being a boss. The boss is a perfect example in any game of the whole challenging consolidation. It's a much more difficult version that takes what you've learned and improves upon it. And this is a great way of learning new things. Is you have to push your boundaries of what you learn in some way in order to increase what you know and use that to apply it too.
And another way how this can apply to Undertale is that each boss in the game has a unique gameplay mechanic. Each boss turns your heart a different color, and that different color influences the way your heart moves, the certain things it can do, like the range of mobility it has, that kind of thing. And it tests what you learned while also making you apply what you've learned in a new way. And a good example would be the boss Papyrus. Instead of your heart being red, where gravity doesn't affect you, you can move freely along the box to dodge attacks. Papyrus turns your heart blue, meaning that gravity affects you. So instead of the game being a more bullet hell type of situation, it's now kind of like a pseudo-platformer. Like, you can actually jump, and when you jump, you'll fall back down. So if you jump too high, too early, you're going to come down and hit one of his attacks, and then you'll take damage.
And the way this is a consolidation of the previous stuff is because you've been playing the game up to this point, and you move your heart around, you dodge certain things. When you get into the fight, you still know what to do, and all those gameplay mechanics are still there. It's just they're changed, and that's the consolidation thing. Is you have to use everything you've learned, except there's this new gameplay mechanic that you have to go, okay, I need to figure this out and apply the other stuff I've learned to that. Then also, this is similar to that is the just-in-time and on-demand, and this is kind of works with the other two. It's the idea that games are not going to overwhelm you with information, and that when you need to know something, that's the point that the games will give that information to you. It might be just before a fight. Might need to know, hey, I need to know this, or it might be during a fight even. You might get the information of how to deal with a certain attack or a certain new game mechanic, but it wouldn't be an example. An example of what it wouldn't be is so you start up a game and then a big text box appears that has every single game mechanic in the game spelled out to you. However, a way that would be the case would be if they might have as you learn stuff, it'll go into like a help menu that appears in the options, and that would be an on-demand. You can access that information on demand. And yeah, it helps give a greater context to that information by giving it to you during or right before something, and from there it also gives you a greater understanding because you can apply that.
Right. The tutorial won't give you information how to beat a boss that you'll encounter 3 hours later in the game.
Mm-hmm. And a way this applies to Undertale is it teaches you new mechanics, and you would learn them. A lot of cases, you learn the secret to the new mechanics like right before you encounter them. There's blue attacks in the game, which the interesting thing about them is you don't move. If you move while the blue attack passes over you, you take damage. If your character isn't moving, then you don't take damage. It goes right over you. This is actually told to you right before the first fight that occurs in. There's a dog that says, "Don't move, don't move, don't move." My vision's based on movement, basically. And then you are thrown into this environment, the battle, and his attacks are blue, and you go, "Oh, you just said not to move, so I won't move." And there you go. That's the just-in-time information.
So the next principle is situated meaning, is that players retain new words and remember old words by associating them with an event. For an example, like the blue attacks that he just said, you associate those blue attacks with the dog. He can't see movement, so you have to sit still. And your best way to avoid that attack is to literally sit still, and that's the only way to avoid it. And you remember that because of the event that was tailored to it, that is his actions, his dialogue, that kind of thing. And they give words more situated meanings, not just stagnant definitions that just say this is that, this is this. It gives you something to reference back in your head. Oh, I remember when I did this, so this is why I'll do it now. It teaches you through the example.
And kind of working into the serious game aspect of it, if you're being taught something that you use in the outside world, say like empathy in Undertale, if it's applied to an example in the game, then you're more likely to go, okay, that's why it's important, or that's why I need to know this, or that's how I do it. It really just improves that, the bonds in your head, neurons connecting and all that.
And yes, so how this can apply to Undertale is the term love refers to a player's level, like as a short acronym, and it has a different meaning. Like you would normally associate this with level and the fact that your character is leveling up, but it actually reveals a more disturbing acronym later in the game. And at the beginning of the game, obviously you'd think that's just normally your character gaining experience, he levels up, that's just how most games work, so that's why you assume. And by the end of the game, love is revealed to be an acronym for level of violence, since you only gain level by the more violent your character is. You'll never gain a level if you don't harm anyone. So exactly, yeah, the higher your level is indicative of the creatures that you kill along the way. And so that means the game can change as it progresses based upon your level or your level of violence. And players will now associate that acronym maybe in other games, like, wow, I only gain levels when I kill other things. Maybe that is really just that's my level of violence. That's just me, committing violent acts against other characters to increase my own level.
And that's very important for teaching. Like there was at the beginning we said teaching that violence is the answer to everything, maybe. Because at the beginning of the game, you're saying, oh, it's level, and like you said, you want to gain level. That's the normal. If you played RPGs, that's just the normal thing you want to do. If you get to the game and you have a large level and it's revealed, oh, this means level of violence, and you go, maybe that wasn't the best decision. And there you go, it provides the situated meaning and the context for the not wanting to, or the not use of violence, for the pacifism, for the use of pacifism. Another way that another aspect of good game learning is being pleasantly frustrated. Basically, the idea is that you feel that tasks are doable but challenging, and then when you lose, it doesn't feel like it's your fault, or it feels like it's your fault and not the game's. Point is that if I played lots of games that are challenging but frustrating in a bad way, i.e., when I finish or when I die or lose or something. I'll go, wow, that game, that was so stupid. How did I die? It was maybe it was my hitbox was too small, or it didn't hit my hitbox, and I go, that was dumb. In that case, that is not pleasantly frustrated. But if I lose a game such as Dark Souls, it's a great example of that. If I go, okay, wow, I lost, but it was completely my fault because I anticipated a move wrong, I'm not going to make that mistake again. And and every time you get a little bit farther, it's kind of a high. You want to go back and do it. You want to learn, and it gives you that motivation to keep learning. And it's same thing. It kind of keeps it keeps on that learning curve of the player's abilities, which is really important for making it so it's still interesting.
Right, just on the edge of your ability, so you feel challenged but not overwhelmed.
A great example of this within Undertale is the final confrontation to the genocide playthrough. This kind of harkens back to the difficulty thing, or the changing, the customization of difficulty. If you kill everything, you're gonna have a harder time playing the game. That's just how it is. And the idea behind this is Sans, who is he's a boss who continually challenges the player's skills that they gain throughout the entire game, and it is a hard fight. But it's fun. Every time you die to him, it does feel like it's your fault, and it's 100% doable once you've learned to understand him and once gone back and faced him. And going back again, it doesn't feel like you're not punished for dying, because there's a save point a few steps away from the boss battle. So you can you lost, okay, no sweat off my back. I got a little farther that time. I'm going to go back and do this.
You'll get better with each attack as you go. Maybe you have trouble with one attack, and the more you practice it, the more you'll be efficient in dodging it the next time.
So yeah, what bosses were pleasantly frustrating to you? What bosses made you when you beat them, or when you got a little bit farther, what boss made you really happy about it? I'm guessing was the boss memorable to you? And as you got better, as you fought the boss and as you lost, did you want to come back? Did it help you keep learning because it was difficult compared to, say, easy boss that you can beat in a few tries? A great example for this, is Nightmare King Grim from the Hollow Knight game. You can fight him really midway through the game if you do it right, and he is an extremely hard fight, and I got very frustrated, but in a good way. Every time I got a little farther, I learned his attack pattern, and the last few tries before I beat him, I was really on top of it, knowing when to heal, knowing when to attack, and I finally beat him. And when I beat him, it felt amazing. And farther after I went out and into the game world and fought other things, I was significantly better at the game because I learned from being challenged by him.
Yeah, another good example for me is Slave Knight Gale in Dark Souls 3. He's the last of the DLC bosses, so naturally you can tell they're going to be pretty difficult. But, everything from the arena to the boss's aesthetic, makes me really want to fight this boss. He seems like a very epic opponent. And then you get in there, likely you'll get obliterated in the first few seconds because you don't understand his attacks. But the thing is, the more you go back and the more you understand what he's doing, once he jumps back, he's going to do a lunge, I'm going to dodge, I'm going to get ready to dodge in a few seconds. Or he's doing a slam attack, I know he follows it up with a spin, so after that spin I can get a few hits in and maybe heal. So just like that learning experience for me is just so rewarding. It's just, you're conquering this astronomical foe that's supposed to, pound you to a pulp. But then as you understand them, your technical skills are far more sound, and you become much more of a better player because of those experiences. And it's a very rewarding thing. So the next principle of James Pongy's good game learning would be system thinking, is that players must think of the ramifications that their actions could have on the future. What certain options could have in the futures of other characters or quests and things like that. Each action that they take can affect the future actions of other characters. Like if you say something particular to them, maybe they won't interact with you later, and maybe they'll even attack you later based on something that you said. And games encourage players to think about those relationships. Like think, what could happen if I say this? What happens if I say this? Maybe I shouldn't say that. That seemed to upset them. Or it helps you understand characters even more. Also, it teaches players to think about the ramification that their actions can really have. Like, what really will happen if I say, okay, you go away, I want to talk to this person, not you. Will that really make a difference? And that's something the players have to think about.
And this aspect of good game learning is actually really it's really good because it not only teaches you how to think of game stuff inside games, but it directly can impact how you might go about decision making outside of games too, because the same things can be applied in the exact same way.
Yeah, and how this applies to Undertale is again return to the theme of making friends instead of killing them. Obviously, you can just kill an enemy, and that's the last you'll see of them. You won't ever interact with them again. And killing even once just means that your perfect run can't happen. Is that you can't be a pure pacifist.
You can't release the monsters from the prison, basically. If
right.
You do that.
And that one kill that you commit would indefinitely affect that outcome. So that's something you have to think about. Every little action can potentially hinder your ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm.
And a good example of this is Papyrus is in the Genocide run. Sans is he's getting increasingly short with you. He's getting angry with you. He's warning you that that if you continue down this path, you're not going to like what happens because obviously he will be forced to fight you. But in the instance that you fight Papyrus, who is Sans' brother, and if you spare him, Sans won't fight you at the end. He'll say, I respect you for that. I respect you for taking my word and for not killing my brother. I'm not going to fight you. I respect what you did back there. So players can really think about, those little actions, sparing one character but killing all the rest can really have such a huge impact on the game and the characters within it.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. When was the last time a game really made you think about a decision? Did it affect the outcome? Are you happy that it did or not? Maybe you weren't expecting it to be, such a big outcome. Did it affect the world around you? And was that something you were glad that happened or something that maybe frustrated you? Did you make the right choice, the wrong choice? And maybe did it change how you made decisions in the real world? It says, so this affected this in this way in the video game. How will it affect in the real life? Maybe I shouldn't say these things or, things like that. And a good example for me is, spoiler if you haven't played Assassin's Creed Odyssey yet, but in the first hour or so of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you encounter a priest and a bunch of soldiers who had just burned down an entire town and are now about to execute a family with 2 small children. And you can either rescue that family or, let the priests do their work and kill them. And the motivating factor is that the family is infected with a plague. And if you choose to free the family, like I did, you will actually find, if you return to your home island later in the game, that there is a violent plague going on. You'll see bodies burning, you'll see people coughing, you'll see, the island has taken a huge turn for the worst simply because of that little action that you took very early on in the game.
Same thing. It's Witcher 3. A great example of that is, the whole game, really. I don't want to spoil anything in particular because it's a lot, but there's a lot of choices in that game that do not make themselves apparent to the ramifications don't make themselves apparent at all until much later in the game. There are certain circumstances where it's like, oh, I just let this one person leave, or I killed this one person, and then later it turns out that resulted in the death of same thing, a whole town, or it might have resulted in people coming into power, or it really makes you think, okay, what am I doing here? Which is important in both the real world and video games. Another aspect is exploring. Teaches you to explore, think laterally, and rethink goals. This encourages players to not just go for the goal without taking stopping and smelling the flowers, basically. It teaches players to think more laterally instead of linearly. Basically, that's exactly what I said. You're not just thinking, okay, this is the single path that I take to the end, nothing else besides that. It teaches you to say, okay, well, what if I went over and did this instead of going and fighting that boss? In a lot of cases, that's done through exploration of the world. For instance, in Skyrim, there's a good chance you didn't just go straight through the main quest and say, okay, I'm done. There's tons and tons of side quests everywhere. And it's very, very easy to just get lost in the game doing, everything else. And it's not only is it a lot of fun, but it grows your powers or abilities, both in character and your ability to play the game, period. And it may give you new items. And yeah, it really helps. It helps players reassess their goals. They might find out due to gaining a little tidbit of lore from a side character that, okay, maybe I don't want to do exactly what I thought I did. And that's again very important in real world, not just video games. You need to think about your goal, but also think about, okay, what about these other possibilities? What if I did this instead of just going straight for it? In Undertale, this is done by encouraging players to explore and interact with really every character in the game. There's tons and tons of little surprises here and there that make it not only the game feel a lot more alive as far as characters, but also improve the gameplay experience as far as giving you items and providing more information and lore into the world. An example is how you can spot the game's antagonist, Flowey, following you around from time to time. Really, there's only a few points that you would see him straight up in the entire game, but there's more than a few that it's alluded to, and there's some that you can actually go back and see him to kind of let you know that, oh, hey, he's following me around through the entire game. And if you see him, it puts it into perspective and makes it feel a lot more eerie when you do finally encounter him. And yeah, so you get better items. There's one where there's a puzzle, and if you solve a puzzle in a less obvious way, you can get a pretty good healing item out of it, and pretty much every useful item as far as weapons and armor, you actually have to go and explore and look around to get.
Even your fast travel mechanic, which is a river man or a river person, they will often say the village underneath the mushroom area, and then when you go and search, you'll find a hidden path and you'll find a whole new area that was simply alluded to by the game's fast travel mechanic person. It's they say something very, very small and minute, but if you actually investigate that, you can find something extremely interesting and even find the most powerful armor, which is in that hidden area. So the next principle is smart tools and distributed knowledge. The core knowledge to play the game is distributed between the players and the characters. So if the player gives a command, the characters in the game know to follow it. So you don't have to know particularly everything. The virtual characters will have vital knowledge and skills that they can lend to you, not only you giving it to them. So they work together to accomplish these tasks. So, for example, in Undertale is Alphys, the royal scientist, is helping you defuse bombs in a certain scenario. And obviously, as a character, you don't know how to defuse bombs, but she installs an app on your phone that allows you to defuse these bombs. So the virtual character is giving you vital information to actually help you, stay alive and succeed. So she stops the bombs from moving, so you can actually, deactivate them with the app. And another really good example would probably be a tower defense game. So instead of Bloons Tower Defense, you place a monkey right there. That's all you have to do. You never have to interact with that monkey again. It just knows that when a balloon gets close, I throw a dart at it. So you don't have to know that. The virtual character is giving you knowledge that you don't have to understand. You don't have to understand how he shoots it. You just let him do his thing.
And that's the key there is that it's a combination of your knowledge and the NPCs in the game. You have to figure out, okay, I need to figure out where and when I want to place this down, or if it's worth the amount of points to use this thing. But once you do, then it takes over for you. In other words, cross-functional teams. This is basically the idea that players each have their own unique abilities depending on what gameplay style you choose or even what character you choose. And in order to work well in a team, this is usually mostly done in co-op games. That's you have to understand the other people, not just your own abilities, but everyone else's abilities, so you can structure the team and figure out how to play with the other people to make the best of your situation and win whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, form a logical team composition so that you have certain characters that do damage, certain characters that can heal you, certain characters that can absorb the damage and kind of protect the team, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's key that they're driven by a common goal, and that's the cooperative aspect of it. So yeah, an application. This doesn't hugely apply in Undertale. There's not a party system or any multiplayer aspect to it. But a great example of this is Overwatch, where players can choose from a number of classes, offensive, defensive, tank, or a more supportive class. And in those categories, there's a huge amount of characters that each play very, very differently from one another. And in order to have an effective team, you have to know, okay, this is my job on the team, and this is everyone else's job on the team. So Mercy, who's a support character who heals you. As a tank, you might want to be near her, so she can heal you while you're taking damage. The DPS character might want to stand behind Reinhardt's shield, so that they're not killed instantly because they have low health. It's all about that interaction between the players and their different types of characters, and how you rationalize that in your head.
So the final principle in James Paul Gee's Principles of Good Game Learning is performance before competence. And basically what this means is that players can perform in the game before they're completely competent on all its mechanics and like exactly how it works. So you don't have to, read the rule book before you start playing a game. The game offers smart tools to help them, things to guide them along, like I said, so you don't have to reference back to like a rule book or something like that. And you can even get support from more advanced players in the form of chat rooms, like maybe communicate with other players and say, how do I do this, or what can I do differently here, things like that. And these smart tools assist the player's language acquisition of the game's world and rules. So like as you go along, you kind of get a sense of what what characters mean when they say certain things, and the terminology of the game. Like you understand when someone says something, this is what they really mean in reference to the game.
And the main reason why this is important, this is important, is basically because it allows the player to play the game even though they might not be a master of it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't, and you wouldn't go into a game being the master of it, so it's really needed to be a playable game.
Right. And also opposite from normal like school scenarios, like in school you have to read up before you go take a test or something. Instead, in a game it's like you kind of take the test in short bursts every now and again just to kind of get you learning and stuff like that. And how this applies to Undertale is that, like in most games, it's a very low difficulty at the beginning, with the help from the tutorial character who is named Toriel. And Toriel basically guides you through, explains to you the mechanics of fighting and sparing. She basically says, you want to talk to monsters because they don't really want to hurt you, so you should spare them. And so she's teaching you these mechanics as you go along and as you learn. And even your first encounter with an enemy, Toriel will actually interrupt the fight sequence, give the monster a dirty look, and then they will run away. Basically saying that this is how fights will work, is that if you spare them, eventually the fight may go in your favor. Maybe not particularly her butting in, but you can, kind of venture a guess as to where the fight can go from there.
And she basically allows you to play the game even though you are absolutely not a master at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important, again, because you want to be able to play. You want to be able to, you're not competent, but by being able to play before you're competent, it lets you eventually become competent. Which is, again, very important in learning because it allows you to have a learning by doing mentality, which is a highly effective tool for teaching. And if it was used in, say, if more things like this were applied, like standard education, if it was used in this fashion, standard education normally focuses on competence before performance. It makes you learn the stuff and then apply it. If you learn to apply it as you're learning it or before you're learning it, it would make it not only generally easier to learn, but probably more interested in it too, because it's usually along the lines of hands-on activities.
And it's more easygoing experience. You learn as you go along, so you don't have to just get slammed with information and then expect to apply it all at once.
So, first question for everybody who's watching this is, so I want you to choose a game that you like and think about the principles of good game learning that apply to it, and then post it in the comments of the YouTube video. And there will be one other of those questions, so if you want to put them in the same comment, that works perfect.
Yep. So Undertale is like, just like, recap everything. Undertale is like a serious game. We can kind of encapsulate some of the lessons that it can teach. For example, empathy. Undertale teaches empathy through story, and the player only gets the truly good ending based on how good of a person they were along the way. If they helped if they helped monsters, if they were nice to them, if they spared them, and even though the monsters are actively trying to kill you, your goal is to not harm a soul. You're not supposed to hurt anyone else, and you will only get the true ending once you do that, which will elaborate more on the lore of the game. You'll get, more character interactions. You'll understand more of what's happening within the game. And it also does this through gameplay. And so, like we said before, the pacifist run, or like the no-kill run, requires you to show mercy to every single monster that you encounter. You cannot kill even one, or the entire run is useless. Like, it's not, you have to restart or go back to the point where you killed that monster. And the gameplay is much easier, if you don't kill these monsters, because they're not as driven to kill you as they would be as in the genocide run, when you're killing their friends, family, and that kind of thing. It makes it feel more personal, and that is a gameplay mechanic itself. And if you're nice to certain monsters, it even convinces them to help you. So at the end, after you spare all these monsters, all your friends gather together to help you fight one foe. All your friends have your back because you spared them along the way and were nice to them as the game went along.
And this is a very, by using the gameplay and the story, say you were a kid who's playing this for the first time. You might not know about empathy. You might not, you're young. If you were to start the game and do the hardcore run, or you were to just go start killing everything, you would get to a point where it would probably be too difficult for you, because there's purposely a steep learning curve in that instance, because it's trying to teach you that, hey, not having empathy is hard. It's hard not to make friends. And if you reverse it, when you play the pacifist run by not killing anything and purposely going out of your way to make friends with everybody, it becomes easier, because with friends it's easier. It's easier to when people have your back, it's going to be an easier time, and that applies definitely to life, not just in the video game. So lesson 2, I guess, we touched on earlier, was not to judge somebody strictly by their appearance, and this is time and time again through Undertale. Undertale is kind of one of their main things is subverting expectations, not only in gameplay, but in characters, and also just little tidbits throughout the story. So a good example would be, at the very beginning of the game, Flowey is the first NPC you see in the entire game. It's purposely very, very... he goes out of his way to show, hey, look how innocent I am. I'm a happy little flower. And then very, very soon after, it becomes clear that he is the opposite of this. He is evil and scary, and it subverts that expectation. They go, oh, okay, it's this type of game. I was not expecting that. Immediately after, you encounter Toriel, and you go, okay, I'm not going to trust you anymore. You say you're helping me, but you're not. And then as you go farther, it turns out, okay, she's actually really, really nice. And again, that's kind of like double subverting your expectations there and showing you, again, don't judge people by appearance or your past interactions with other people of the type. And then, yeah, farther on, Undyne, another character who appears extremely scary, a very like hot-headed, violent person, turns out to be really nice once you get to know her. And because she's so hot-headed, it also shows she is also extremely passionate about everything else, such as cooking, which you wouldn't have known, again, if you hadn't, taken time to get to know the person. If you had only judged her by your appearance, it would have been the opposite. And through gameplay, this is shown very early on in that first encounter with Flowey. He says, okay, hey, the way to survive in this world is by collecting these friendliness pellets. And you go, okay, this is the gameplay. It's telling me that I need to do this to win the game. You collect them, and it instantly drops your health down to 1. Which is a great way of showing through gameplay, okay, don't trust everybody or don't take everything at face value necessarily. And again, this is at that moment after this happens, Toriel rushes in to save you, and then it kind of rolls into the whole thing. But it's a great way through gameplay to do this. Another way is Sans, who appears to be a very, very laid-back character in the Pacifist run, and even part of the Genocide run before you start getting too deep into it. By the end of the game, he is ends up being by far the hardest fight in the game. And it kind of, if you didn't know it was coming, which is again the first playthrough of this type, you wouldn't. It's extremely like, okay, where did this come from? It catches you off guard, and again, that reinforces the extreme spike in difficulty from the character you didn't expect it from. It enforces the whole idea of don't judge a person by their appearance.
Our next lesson that Undertale can teach as a serious game would be that every person is unique. Like we were saying earlier, you're not supposed to trust Flowey because he just betrayed you. But right after that, introduce a Toriel, and you're skeptical. But at the same time, you're judging that person based on the previous encounter that you just had, which, isn't fair, and this person is completely different. So, for example, Toriel's being super nice to you, and your immediate reaction is, I just got tricked just a few seconds ago, why should I trust you? When actually she's the most empathetic, loving, and caring character in the entire game. So that's, how you can tell it through story. And similar with Undyne. She appears to be, this hard-headed knight, that her only goal is to kill humans. But the second you get to know her, she teaches you that she's actually, underneath that rough exterior, she's a very nice and caring person as well, also very passionate. And through gameplay, every single enemy has a very unique form of attack that displays their personality. For example, the enemy Frogget will attack you using flies, and the enemy Magic will attack you, obviously, using magic because he's a magician. And that similarly, all bosses have their own unique gameplay elements and fighting mechanics. So Undyne turns you green, you have to defend against those arrows. Sans and Papyrus make you blue, so you have to, gravity affects you, you have to jump. And, things like that. Alphys' creation, Metaton, the robot, he makes you yellow, flips you upside down, and allows you to shoot little bullets back, fighting back within the actual fight.
So, fourth one is that problems can be solved without the use of violence, and this is, again, one of the key things that Undertale goes out of its way to hammer into your head, which is a good thing. Through the story, again, there's 2 gameplay options you can take. There's a pacifist run and a genocide run, one where you kill people, one where you don't. And the pacifist run is considered the good ending. It definitely gives the most satisfying one. In game, the characters will criticize you for using violence, which, again, if you've already played, so if you haven't played the pacifist run before this, it still goes, okay, I'm the one being the bad guy. Characters will come out and literally say, okay, you are the monster of this game. An enemy named Undyne, when you fight her in the Genocide run, she's the hero of the game, while you are very much called out as being the monster of the game. You are killing these people, you're killing these innocents. and another one would be Sans. Yeah, he'll call you out for what you did. And the good ending of the game requires that all enemies are spared, which is a much more satisfying ending because all the monsters end up getting out. Through gameplay, all enemies in the game can be spared. Every single enemy in the game can be spared, which is a complete contrast from pretty much every other RPG. And furthermore, non-violent actions help the player in other ways, such as giving healing, such as I think Vegetoid and Washore examples from earlier, and also it's a less difficult gameplay option to do it that way. So it ends up helping you if you choose to do it that way. That's it. So the second question would be. Give an example of a lesson that you learned in a serious game. That means a game that you used storytelling and or mechanics, but focusing mostly on mechanics in a game. And then, explain how it was taught and, what it taught you.
So, to start summing up, serious games use mechanics and story to teach players about something in the real world. For example, Undertale really hammers in your head the fact that you shouldn't be violent and you should always be empathetic towards others and understand that they're unique, they have their own backstory, they have their own motivations, and the fact that you don't need to resort to violence no matter how crazy or life-threatening the situation may seem. There's always maybe another choice other than violence. And these principles of gaming outline how games can effectively teach a player through his 16 principles, and through gameplay, through story, and different ways that games can actually teach you. And that also interaction between player and game can help strengthen the connections with the morals and lessons. Again, returning to that theme of empathy, the characters really, beat a dead horse with it. They just keep telling you, violence is bad. You can always talk to people. So, these experiences that you can literally reference back in your head. I remember when this character said that, so maybe I won't do this in the real life. They can really influence your actual, decisions and things that you make in the real world that you might even be doing subconsciously.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be about it from us. If you would answer those two questions in the comments, think about the game, the questions that involve you thinking. Take a time to think about those. And if you would like to, I'll link the presentation by Ian Bogost about the same topic, serious games, in the comments or down below, so you can check out that. Aside from that, we'll be signing off. I've been Ian.
I'm Cameron.
And we'll probably not see you later because this is an online class, but have a good day.
Thank you.